And welcome everyone to this presentation. We're just going to talk about the myths and the facts about the selective service. And my name is Chuck Horton, Charles Horton. I am the Senior Director of Advocacy and Inclusion for English. I am also the board chair for Disability Pride PA, and I'm a member of the selective service. And we have Drew, and let me handle. I'm an African American male. I have locks. Some people refer to them as dreadlocks. I have on a black shirt. Which is a disability pride shirt, and I'm sitting in front of a tan and like an orangish wall to the side, and that's me. So, Drew, to introduce yourself.
Okay, well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for having me here on this Disability Pride event. And my name is Drew Techner. I'm assigned to the Selective Service System, which is an independent federal agency, better known to most people as the Standby Military Draft. And I am a military member. I'm an Army reservist. And right now, I'm in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, traveling on the road. I was doing military things, activities, and I'm actually in an office. I am a white male. I'm wearing a dark blue Selective Service System polo shirt. And the background would be like a cream white color on the walls.
Great, thank you, Drew. So let's get this thing started. So, Drew, could you tell us what is the selective service?
Well, the Selective Service is an independent federal agency that's in the standby mode. And it's been in the standby mode for a very long time because there is no current military draft. And there's no current plans to restart a military draft. The last time that we had a draft was 1973. However, we still need the agency in the event that Congress and the president were to have a draft. We can't put together this agency at that time. We have to have the agency already in place, and we have volunteers that serve as local board members. They're on standby. They're all across the country, that in the event of a draft and that young men were to make claims of exemptions, postponement, these volunteers would be trained and be able to review those claims from young men.
So, if there was, so you just gave a quick overview of what selective service is and how it works a little bit. But if the selective service needs to be activated, like you went through the process of that, but is it any more broader information that like locally that people should know?
Well, since 1980, we have had a federal law, and that's the Military Selective Service Act. This was approved by Congress back in 1980, and the law hasn't changed. Young men within 30 days that they turn 18 years of age are required to register with the Selective Service System. Now, they can do this in one of two ways. They can go to the post office and fill out a Selective Service System registration card, or more easily, they can do it at home from a computer, which would take probably less time, and they would be able to get their Selective Service number right away. And what's really good about this is that young men can go back to this website, which is www.sss.gov. And they can go to this website at any time once they've registered, and they can get their Selective Service number. And the federal law, again, is within 30 days of a young man's 18th birthday, However, the agency allows young men to register up until the moment they turn 26 years of age. So really, they have between the ages of 18 through 25 that they can comply with the federal law and register with the Selective Service.
Great. So if there were ever a draft and then could an individual and they were drafted, could an individual pick what branch of the military they wanted to serve with?
No, they cannot. Once they're selected by the Selective Service system, they the Department of Defense will assign that young man to the branch of service that is determined by the Department of Defense. What a young man can do is go to their local recruiter and work with their local recruiter of the branch of service that they're interested in, because even if there was a draft in effect, the various branches of the military would still maintain their recruitment and have their recruiting offices open. So that would always be an option that would be available to them.
Okay. So how if the individual's drafted, how long would they have to serve?
They would be obligated to serve up to 2 years.
Okay. So if they were drafted, could they enlist after that if they wanted to?
Well, no, once they're drafted, they're drafted, and they would be reporting to a medical examination, and they would be evaluated at that time for their fitness. And if they pass the medical examination, they would be notified, and they would be drafted.
Okay, great. So if an individual is the only male child or the youngest child in their family, can they still be drafted?
Well, I'm going to look this up here because I took some notes about that. You have myths as the title of our talk today, and I'm glad, because that is one of the myths, Charles, that if you're the only son or the last son to carry the family's name, or the sole surviving son, that somehow this young man is not required to register. Now, within that myth, there's another myth, and the myth is that if a young man feels that they wouldn't be eligible for the draft, that they don't have to register with the Selective Service system. Well, that's not true, because any claims for exemptions, deferments, and postponements would only be available to the young men that have registered with the Selective Service system. Now, all the classifications for claims are available on our website, the Selective Service System website. And the closest thing, or really the only classification that comes close to being the only surviving son and so forth, would be a classification that would involve where there's a military death that has occurred in the family. So that's something that's unusual. And it would be the sole surviving son classification. Son or brothers in a family where the parent or a sibling died as a result of US military service. So that's very specific, and that really doesn't pertain to what we see as being one of the major myths, is that if you're the only child, simply the only child, or the youngest child in the family, that you're not required to register and that you're automatically exempt from being drafted. That's simply not true.
Okay. So how does you touched on a little bit about eligibility and ineligibility. Can you give an individual, let us know, like, what would make a person eligible or ineligible to serve or be drafted?
Well, the eligibility is all men that are aged 18 to 25 years old. And if selected, by the Selective Service System that they would report for a medical examination. Now, they would go through a series of examinations to determine that they were mentally, physically, and morally fit for military service. And only if selected would these young men be eligible to make any type of claim for a postponement, deferment, or exemption.
Okay. So you did talk about how to register, and you said it was www.sss.gov.
Right, www.sss.gov.
And we added it to the chat. So if anybody wanted to know where to go, that's where you can go. We listed it in there for individuals.
When young men go to that website, the only thing that they need to have is a valid social security number. So if they don't have a social security number yet, they have to make sure to get that first.
Okay, great. And you tapped on when do you apply for the Selective Service? I know there is a few months before you turn 18.
The way the law is stated, the Military Selective Service Act,
Mhm.
they have within 30 days of their 18th birthday. So if they strictly go by the law, this is 61 days. This is the day of their 18th birthday, 30 days prior, and 30 days after. However, you get young students, maybe in their young men that are in their senior year of high school, and they may be applying for financial aid. So the Selective Service System knows that they're going to be applying for federal aid as well as state financial aid. And it's not practical for them to have to wait until within 30 days to get their selective service number to put on the application. Many times these students are applying 6 to 9 months earlier. So what the Selective Service System enables is the young men aged 17 and 3 months, as early as 17 years and 3 months. So 9 months before they turn 18, they can go onto the Selective Service System's website. They can pre-register. And this pre-registration does two things. It instantly gives the young man their selective service number that they can put on their federal or state financial aid application. Then within 30 days of their 18th birthday, that pre-registration automatically becomes a registration, and they have registered with the Selective Service.
Great.
Now, on the back, well, Charles, I want to point out the backside of this is that if a young man reaches the age of 26 and they have failed to register, they can no longer register. There is no waiver for this. And then they may experience problems by failing to comply with the federal law. And I know we've gone through this before, and there's a list of some basic things that a young man would not be eligible for if they have failed to register. And these things would be, which I had mentioned, federal student financial aid, state-funded student financial aid in most states, most federal employment, some state employment, security clearances for contractors, and job training under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and also U.S. citizenship for immigrant men. And that's quite a list, don't you think, Charles?
Yes, it definitely is. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you about this, and for so many and and really get the information out here, because there's a lot of people with disabilities that might not realize that even though you have a disability, I'm telling you, everybody, you have to still apply, no matter you have a disability or not, because you're not exempt. And even if you know that you're physically able, you will never be able to serve in the military. You still have to apply, because there's these other provisions that are available to you that you will not be able to acquire if you don't apply for the selective service. So it's very important for our community to understand that you still need to apply. If you're a caregiver for someone who is who have a disability or parent or anything, please make sure that you still apply. Your male loved ones or the ones that you support for selective service. Now, you said a lot of male needs to apply. Are women required to apply for the selective service?
Under the current federal law, women are not required to register with the Selective Service.
So, I mean, and that's something that if that needs to be changed, you have to go to your legislator to ask for something that to happen.
Right. It would literally take an act of Congress, that Congress and the president would have to amend, change that federal law to permit or require the registration of women. Now, Charles, there was something I came across in preparing for this interview that I did want to share with you, because you mentioned disabled men. And on our Selective Service website, the question was posed about, do disabled men or men that have medical conditions, are they required to register? And basically the question related to some of the circumstances that disabled men and men in a medical status could encounter. So I wanted to read this to you. Now, the only process now in effect is that men between the ages of 18 through 25 register with the Selective Service and keep their registration record current during that period. Neither the Military Selective Service Act nor the Presidential Proclamation provide an exemption from registration because of a man's mental or physical condition until certain criteria are met. The requirements for exemption are if a man is placed in a hospital, nursing home, long-term care facility, or mental institution on or before his 18th birthday, had no breaks of institutionalization of 30 days or longer, and remain institutionalized until his 26th birthday, he is not required to register. And the other situation would be is if he is confined to home, whether his own or someone else's, including group homes, on or before his 18th birthday, and cannot leave the home without medical assistance, for example, by ambulance or with the help of a nurse or EMT, and remain homebound until his 26th birthday, he is not required to register. So these are two situations that it's on our Selective Service System website pertaining to disabled men and men with medical conditions. Even then, the situations are exigent circumstances. These are men that were unable. The agency is recognizing that these men were unable to comply and register. Now, the other note that should go along with this is that proof of the individual circumstances must be provided to the Selective Service. Once our agency has the documentation, A determination is then made by selective service as to whether or not the man qualifies from exemption from registration. But Charles, all that having been said, that should be the last resort. It should be unusual set of circumstances. If in any way that a young man, regardless of their situation, can register, they should.
Yes.
It'll prevent a lot of problems. And the way we see it is 45 seconds of registration, which can easily be done on our website, can save 45 years of aggravation.
Definitely. Definitely. So, in your work, what populations do you think is missing the most in registering for the selective service?
It's the men in the largest cities, the large population centers, because that's where we find the least registration compliance. For example, Philadelphia. Now, the last time we talked, Charles, we were hovering around 42 to 46% registration compliance of young men aged 18 to 25 years old that lived in the county of Philadelphia. Well, since that time, that number has dropped. It's dropped below 40%, and that's unacceptable because, once again, these young men that are living in cities which have a lot of socioeconomic problems, here they are, and when they turn 26 years old, they're going to have a further hindrance, which is the loss of some of those opportunities that we talked about.
And you gave an overview of some of the programs, but in the past we did talk about that there may be even some more programs that an individual will not be able to qualify for in this programming and this employment, and there's a lot of different things that our community really have to understand, and everybody has to understand across the board that applying for selective service, uh, it really will make your life better in the long run. And don't fear the draft. Don't fear that it's coming because it hasn't happened in so long.
We don't have plans. There are no current plans to resume the draft, the military draft. And I've been saying that for years. Nonetheless, we have to have the agency. Think of the selective service system as the fire insurance policy that you have on your house. You're investing in it by paying the premiums each month, but you hope that you never use it. And that's what the selective service system is. It's our nation's insurance policy, and we hope that we never use that. We have an all volunteer military, and only if Congress and the president decide that is not enough would they look at the selective service system to assist.
So in your work, I know you've done this for a long time. Besides some of the things that I've asked you, what do you feel is some of the other myths or fears or information sharing that you've heard people say that kind of like shocked you?
Well, here's one. The biggest myth is that by registering with the selective service, there's somehow one step closer to joining the military. That by registering, by complying with the federal law, that they have joined the military, or that they will be drafted, and that's simply not true. That's the biggest myth right there, Charles.
Yeah. And can you explain like the different ways that individuals might not be drafted actually if they receive notification that they need to come down because they have the potential to be drafted? There are a couple different like conscientious objector and things like that. Could you give an overview of those different
There's
categories?
there are claims,
Hmm.
and these claims are listed on our website, and some examples of the claims that young men could make would be a student postponement, which would be till the end of a school semester or the end of a school year, if that school year is ending in graduation. Another example would be, of course, a conscientious objector, where a young man has a strongly and sincere held belief that they cannot participate in war or serving in the military. The other claims that a young man could make would be hardship to dependents, that they are eligible to serve in the military, but if they were to serve in the military, it would interfere with support of one of their dependents, a wife, a child, or a parent, for example. There are many other claims that a young man can make. However, the big thing to note is that none of these claims are available to the young men unless they register. So we talk about benefits of registration, and we can't forget the big benefit here is the opportunity for young men to be able to make these claims. They can only do that if they register with the Selective Service System.
And is there any major penalties for not applying?
There are penalties. The penalty is $250,000 fine and 5 years imprisonment. Now, the way it's been for a long time is that our position is registration, not prosecution. So we really try to encourage the young men to simply register, comply with the law, get it out of the way. It's one less thing that they have to worry about. And we focus on the positives. We focus on them maintaining their eligibility for their benefits.
And this is some personal questions about yourself. Like what area do you oversee?
As a reserve service member, I cover the eastern half of state of Pennsylvania. And what I do is I recruit volunteers from the community that are willing to serve on local draft boards. I then give them their training that's required for them to successfully adjudicate claims of young men if there ever was to be a draft. And the other activities that we do is I partner with the leadership of high schools, principals and guidance counselors in an effort to have this leadership serve as ambassadors in their schools and get the word out to the young men so that they register before we lose contact with them when they complete high school.
So with that, as you work with the high schools but is there other ways that just, I guess, in our community itself that you feel might be ways to spread the word about applying for Selective Service?
Yes, because it doesn't have to be you, Charles, and you're one of our local volunteers on our local board. It doesn't have to be you. It doesn't have to be just me, the reserve service member assigned to the Selective Service System. It could be, there's leadership everywhere. A teacher reaching out to a student, a coach reaching out to a team player. And there's many opportunities everywhere in the community. It's a hot summer, and you could be sitting on your step, and you see some, young men out there on a basketball game, and say, "Hey, come here," and talk to them. You're somebody from the neighborhood, and then there's leadership right there. And it could be a family member or a friend, or they have somebody who's of an age that they should be registering with the Selective Service. And that's what we need. We need anyone and everyone to think about this.
So is there any volunteers or anybody that actually, like, if somebody wanted to get someone to come out and talk to an organization or just share with individuals, do you have a team, or would you be the one that would go and do it if requested?
I could certainly be the one. Charles, if you get that information of somebody who's interested, we can do what we've done before. You can reach out to me, and we can see if we can come out and provide this information, because we're a very small federal agency, and the information it doesn't get a real chance to get out there effectively the way that we wish that it could. And like you said, Charles, there are myths, because go to our website. We really need everyone that has a concern to go take a look at our website, which has a lot of information, or reach out to our agency. They can call our agency and somebody will get back to them. And we don't want rumors and myths to go out there when we have the answers. We just have to have an opportunity to clarify any potential problems.
So do you feel, is there, if we as a community, as a disabilities community itself, could just support you, in your endeavors, do you have any ideas or anything that you would like to, push for us to support your movement?
I think that we've actually done a lot with disability pride over the past 2 years, working under your leadership, Charles. And it's been very effective. On the internet, the previous podcast that you and I did is out there, it's available. And I just think that this has been it's been a pleasure. It's been one of the few opportunities I've had to get that voice out there about this, what young men have to do, the benefits of doing it, and what it can mean for the rest of their lives, for their future.
Yeah, and we really do appreciate you for being so forward and with our community and sharing this information, because a lot of the things that we heard as myths, a lot of people live by them and not understand that it can really be detrimental for our community, because with employment, we know that sometimes there's organizations that might not be too receptive to our community, specifically to those myths and some discriminatory things or just lack of knowledge. But when you have this opportunity for to be a part of the system, that Selective Services opens up a lot of doors for us as a community, and to be educated and go to college, it's really valuable. And we really thank you for that, for sharing all of this with us.
Well, Charles, one of the things that is a myth that you had mentioned a week or two ago, that somehow by registering with the Selective Service, that minorities would be drafted first. And let's put an end to that myth right now, because in the history of this country, there have been inequities, and the selective service system today is not the same selective service system as of before. The agency shut down in 1973 and was resumed in 1980, effectively as a different agency with a different law, the Military Selective Service Act of 1980. And under the selective service system of today, if there was a draft, there would be representation with diversity in the community, and both men and women would serve on these local boards, and the boards would reflect the demographics of the community. And that's something that we're very proud of.
Yeah, and I do appreciate. I appreciate you actually addressing that, because in our past conversations, we know that the numbers in Philadelphia for minorities is extremely low, and some of the top numbers within the African American and the minority community is really high, who haven't applied for selective service because of
Well,
those
I think that stems from misunderstandings, that myths, experiences of a previous generation that have been passed down to today's young men, where conditions have changed.
Yeah.
And they need to register once again to get the good things, to get those opportunities, to keep those opportunities, and for them to have the opportunity to make claims if there ever was a draft.
So if a person, do you know if there's any paid or other volunteer employment opportunities with the selective service?
Any jobs that are available with the selective service system that are paid, there you can look at the USA Jobs website, but you can also look at our website, the Selective Service System website, the www.sss.gov. We would advertise positions there. Now, for non-paid volunteer positions, that would be a local board member, somebody volunteering to serve in their community on one of these standby draft boards. And for that, they can go also to our website.
And so a person can volunteer to be a part of the board, or that's how you do your recruitment?
I'm sorry, Charles?
I said, so a person could go actually to the website, and that's how you do your recruitment for members of the board?
Recruitment, yes, the internet, our website is one way that we recruit local board members. It could be, Charles, that you know somebody that would like to serve, and you can request an application from our website. And from there, I would do the interview, or somebody else within our agency would do the interview, and we would take it from there.
And I think individuals also need to understand that this is a very serious matter when you are a board member, that there's courses that you have to take. There's you have to stay up with certain classes so that you're educated about how this whole system works. And it's not just, okay, I volunteered, I'm just, okay, I have something to put on my resume and I leave it alone right there. No, this is a very serious matter. And you have to maintain knowledgeable about the whole system.
Well, that's a very good point, because sometimes that does happen, and it's a disappointment. We'll have folks that will volunteer to be a board member, but they won't follow through with the training. Now, Charles, you just completed the initial board member training. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yes, so it was a lot of questions and education. It was Ooh, I think it took about like 3 days. And I did it at my leisure. You can just go and sit in front of your computer and just knock it out probably in a
Right.
day and a half. But you give an opportunity for individuals to actually learn in depth about the selective service and about government issues and about programming that could be available. And I think it's really a good thing for people within the disabilities community to understand that we are a part of this and our voice is very, very valuable to try to volunteer on something like the Selective Service Board. But it's, you have to be there. You have to be present. Cannot be present in this because you have to understand that this is going to affect the community if something ever happens, and that's the community as a whole. To if someone wants to go into the is going to be draft or just the whole process on what your responsibilities is as a board member. So if someone wanted to go into the avenue or want to volunteer, understand this is a very, very serious matter, and there's a lot of people that, I mean, you're going to be responsible for our country in so many words. You're going to be a part of making some decisions where people will have to defend our country if a draft is ever enacted. So you have to take this serious, and you have to take those courses serious and be present when or if you're ever called upon to serve your country. And see, that's another thing that people have to understand, especially in our community. If you don't have the ability to serve because of physical or your disability, you still have the opportunity to serve our country in the volunteer process to be a part of this selective service board. So that's something that's really honorable and really to take in consideration.
Charles, thank you. Thank you very much. And you are a recent graduate of our initial board member training.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
And I know that you've served on so many other capacities besides here. You was a Philadelphia police officer for a number of years, and so it's like you've dedicated your life to being to serving our city
Public
and serve our
service.
countries. Yeah, public servant for years, and that's really commendable for you. And we really thank you for. I mean, our long talks about so many different things, and just learning about the government and learning about what you do. And I mean, go ahead.
Well, what's really neat is Charles, as a volunteer, you applied yourself in the training, and now we're doing this discussion. Volunteers are going to enjoy things more when they apply themselves and do things like what you're doing, Charles.
Thank you, thank you. And I know that you as a part of your job, I think you do you're a chaplain for
No,
concept.
I do military funeral honors.
Mhm.
So in fact, that's why I'm in Hazleton, Pennsylvania today. I live in Philadelphia, and what I do full time is every day I do military funeral honors either in a funeral home or in a cemetery where we're honoring veterans that have served in the Army. I'm assigned to the Army, I'm an Army officer. So each branch of service performs military funeral honors for those veterans that were from their service. We don't forget, and it's a nice program that was authorized by Congress years ago under the National Defense Authorization Act, where veterans are entitled, that those that are that had honorable service, that they're entitled to military funeral honors, and it's a wonderful experience for the families.
And when you do like those honors, what is it? Like how it's the process of.
We get a team of a minimum of two sometimes 3 soldiers, and we go out into a cemetery or a funeral home, and the mission is to provide 3 things: to fold the American flag, to play taps, and to present the flag to the next of kin and express condolences on behalf of the president. And the families absolutely appreciate this. It is something that they will always remember for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and it's great that you really don't forget our veterans, no matter how long ago that they served, and just that's really honorable on your behalf. And we want individuals that's here. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And what we'll do is we're going to probably address them a little bit later, because we want you to really give the selective service and the nuances of it is so broad, you know, and we want to make sure that we supply answers to individuals that are fully um that's just full. We don't want to give you an answer that might lead you a wrong way or just minimal, because uh, applying for the selective service, like Drew said, can be a lifetime. Some of the things that you do can affect you for the rest of your life. So if you have any questions or anything like that, you can put them in the chat, and what we'll do, we'll address them later. Also, this presentation will be later on our YouTube page. It's for Disability Pride, that it can be used and you can share it with your communities. And like you said, you can reach out to me, and what we'll do is I'll reach out to him and let him know if you wanted him to do a presentation to talk to you or your community, so that you're fully knowledgeable about what the selective service is and the 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 truth
Well,
of it.
while we're waiting, I have just a few minutes left,
Okay.
and I may have to leave in about 5 minutes. But Charles, I wanted to go over with you
Mhm.
the sequence of events that if there actually was an activation of the selective service system.
Okay, great.
Um, the first thing would be that Congress and the president would have to authorize a draft. And we're talking about a national emergency. A draft under the Military Selective Service Act is not limited to an act of war. And that's one of the myths about the selective service system, that it's only limited to some hostile action from another nation. It's actually broader than that in the sense that it's a national emergency. So under the Military Selective Service Act, a draft could be authorized by Congress and the president in the event of a national emergency, which could be something that's unrelated to war. It could be a natural disaster, for example. And the next thing that would happen would be the selective service system would be activated, to where myself and other military members would open up area offices across the country in communities. These area offices don't exist today. So if you're looking for a brick and mortar site for the selective service system, we have our national headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, and then we have 3 region headquarters across the country. Here on the eastern half of the country, the northeast corner of the country, United States, that headquarters would be Region 1 in North Chicago. So if the selective service system, if it was activated because of the draft, there would be area offices that would open up at that time. And then a lottery a lottery would be held at various times. And the lottery is a random drawing of birthdays and numbers, which will establish the order in which individuals receive orders to report for induction. And it's interesting to note that the first induction orders, the first young men to be drafted, would be those 20 years of age. And it would go up through those ages, 21 through 25, and only then would they induct after the 25-year-olds. Then it would be 19 years old, and finally it would be the 18-year-olds. Then what would happen is induction notices would be sent out to young men, and they would be able to make claims if they desired. And a booklet would be given to these young men that would receive their induction notices. And the booklets would contain the various classifications, and these young men would be encouraged to make claims of any claims, more than one, as many claims as they feel that they're eligible for. And these would involve postponements, deferments, and exemptions. Now, I'm on a phone here for this call, and if it shuts down suddenly, I apologize. I got a message that it was using data. But then you would have the military entrance processing stations known as MEPS. And the various young men that were inducted would report first there for a medical examination. Then they would be told to go home, and they would await results of the medical evaluation. And if medically they were eligible to serve, at that time, they would be able to make various claims for the postponements, exemptions, and so forth. Then the local and district appeal boards would come into operation. And this would be your role, Charles. So the local boards would be activated, your volunteers, you would receive refresher training, and you would start reviewing the claims of young men that are seeking these postponements and deferments and so forth. Finally, at day 193, 193 days after a draft has been authorized, would the first inductee, the first young men, be drafted and be brought into the U.S. military. Wow. And all this, by the way, is on our website, this timeline. I've looked at our website recently. It's been revamped. It's much more thorough, complete, and very informative.
Great. Drew, we really I thank you for all of the total information, and we I just want to thank Rita Jo and her team for supporting us. Izzy Kaufman, who is the vice chair for Disability Pride, and Vicki Landers, who is the president of Disability Pride, and everybody that came to learn from this presentation. And just,
hey, Chuck.
Yes.
There's one question here.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Drew, this is a question that you might not have the answer for today, but what we can do, we can probably get the answer for someone later on. So okay. This is from Rich Davis. And Rich asked, he said, I am a career life coach, and this is great information. I understand that the draft is for only males. My question is, if someone is transsexual, by law, by law, hold up, by law, do they need to register according to their birth, sex, or their sexual identity?
The registration requirement is according to their birth sex.
Yeah, And we just wondered that is transgendered and not transsexual. So
So there we go.
yeah, and so you said it'd be according to their birth.
Right, it would go by their birth sex, yes.
Okay, all right. And if anyone has any other questions, what we can do is we can just take them. You can email them to me, or you can email them to Disability Pride PA. And what we'll do is we'll get them to Drew, and we'll get your response to anything or any question that you might have.
Right. And thank you, Rich, for that question.
All
Yep.
right. Do
Very
anybody?
good. Well, thank you.
Would you say, Rich? Oh, I thought he chimed in.
No, I didn't say anything except thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rich. And do anybody have any other questions before we close out? Okay.
Charles, thank you.
Drew, thank you so much, because of really this information is so valuable, and a lot of people have no idea or have no knowledge about really the long-term effects of not applying for a selective service. That's the one thing that people really need to understand, and especially for our community
Yeah.
of individuals with disabilities, and the myth of thinking that you don't have to apply because you have a disability, and you might not be drafted because of your disability itself. It needs to be really shared with our community on a larger scale, because especially those scholarships for a higher level of education is really important for our community, and government employment, which is the government is really open to being diverse and hiring people with disabilities, with all the other programs that are available within government specifically for people with disabilities. And you don't want to, as a person with disability, go to apply for a job, and you go for an interview and you find out that you can't get it because you didn't, as you say, it take 45 seconds that can affect 45 years.
And that's what I've been really excited to say.
Yeah.
If I could leave everyone with this one thought: 45 seconds to register will save 45 years of aggravation in somebody's life, in a young man's life.
Great, and we're gonna leave it on that note right there, and that's a good way to end it. So go ahead, Iz.
Thank you so much, both of you, for providing this workshop and like spreading information about the selective service. I honestly didn't know like anything about it, so I really appreciate you taking the time to let me know. It was really interesting, like, and just learning about why people with disabilities should be involved on the boards and stuff. I've never thought about this, so really thank you so much for doing that.
And we have to thank Drew, because Drew was the one, he reached out to me, and Drew understood. I think he really saw that there was a need to have representation on this board of a person with a disability. So I commend him for that. And I think you referred by Councilman O,
Yes.
who is a friend of the disabilities community and supported and recognized that disability is our voice is valuable in the process. So Drew, we want to thank you for all of it.
Thank you so much for that
Thank you very much.
So we still have some more like Disability Pride virtual PA events coming up. Tonight is Life After Gun Violence, a Survivor's Perspective, from 6 to 8 p.m. Also with Chuck. And on Wednesday from 10 to 12, we have at the IEP, Access for All. And from 8 to 9:30, we're having a social dress-up wrap-up party with the board, where we're going to chat about the events and talk about what's coming up next for Disability Pride PA. So
Hey, Izzy,
join
I
us.
wanted one thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to let everybody know that last week we had some technical difficulties with the unmasking workshop for neurodivergent adults. So we are putting that up tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. for everybody. It is on the website. It is on the information going out about the day's events. And then also there are a lot of folks who asked me that missed the Lives Worth Living movie. So the Roads to Freedom Sill is going to show that again, just watching the movie. There won't be any chatter afterwards, unfortunately, but it'll be going on tomorrow from 5 to 6.
Great, thanks, Vic. All right, everyone, we just want to close out and thank you again for coming to learn about what's going on within the Selective Service and the disabilities community and supporting us as a whole. So this is Disability Pride Virtual PA 2021. Yay. Thank you, everyone. Y'all have a great day and be safe in all this heat. Drink water and look out for yourself. Protect yourself. All right.
And your community.
And your community and your loved ones.
Check on your disabled neighbors and your elderly neighbors.
Yep. We make sure everybody's safe, okay? Take care, everyone.
Take
See you
care.
at
Bye.
6.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right, no problem. See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye now.